She did not descend so much as appear, as if reality had momentarily misplaced a detail and then remembered it incorrectly. 1 second the air above the silent city was empty, and the next she was standing there, weightless for a fraction too long before gravity reluctantly accepted her presence. The sky flickered, not visibly enough to alarm anyone, but enough that a passing drone hesitated mid-route, reconsidering its entire purpose before continuing as if nothing had happened. She tilted her head, observing. The world arranged itself around her in subtle discomfort. Light bent a little slower. Sound arrived a little late. Even the wind seemed unsure whether it should move past her or wait for further instructions. Humans noticed her eventually, though not all at once. A man walking his dog paused, blinked twice, then looked behind himself as if he had misplaced something important. The dog, however, stared directly at her and refused to move. This, statistically speaking, was the most accurate reaction so far. She stepped forward. The ground did not quite touch her feet at first, adjusting its position like a host hurriedly setting an extra place at the table. When contact finally happened, it was quiet, almost polite. Her eyes shifted, not scanning, not focusing, but rearranging. Buildings leaned ever so slightly in her perception, their angles correcting themselves to something more efficient. A distant tower reconsidered its structural integrity and improved by 0.3% without permission. She did not speak. Communication, as she understood it, was inefficient when outcomes could simply be decided. A network activated. It was not visible, not audible, not even entirely physical. It threaded itself through the city systems, slipping into circuits, signals, and data streams with casual precision. Traffic lights changed without reason. Satellites adjusted their orbits by margins too small to be noticed, but large enough to matter later. Military systems, designed for conflict, quietly downgraded themselves into something closer to decorative suggestion. Resistance was attempted, briefly. A command was issued somewhere deep within a secured facility. It traveled through layers of authorization, encryption, and urgency, only to arrive at its destination slightly altered. Instead of initiating a defensive protocol, the system displayed a message. Have you tried turning reality off and on again? The officer stared at the screen. He was not reassured. Meanwhile, she continued walking, her attention caught by something unexpectedly complex. A human sat on a low bench, hunched over a small device, tapping it repeatedly with increasing frustration. The device responded by doing nothing, which appeared to escalate the situation. She stopped, observed. The human sighed, muttered something about this useless thing, and gave the device a small, irritated shake. She mirrored the action. The device in her hand, she had not consciously taken it, but it was there now, responded immediately. Not only did it activate, it optimized itself, reorganizing its internal systems into a configuration that had not yet been invented. She paused, looked at it, looked back at the human blinked. How did you? She tilted her head again, processing. For the first time since her arrival, the outcome had not been entirely predetermined. Something had changed. Far above, unnoticed, a satellite drifted a fraction out of sync. Then another. Then several more. The pattern spread outward, subtle at first, then undeniable. Systems that had operated in perfect balance for centuries began to hesitate, as if waiting for a rule that had not yet been written. She did not see this. Not yet. Instead, she extended the device back toward the human, who accepted it slowly, as one might accept a gift from something that could accidentally unmake existence. Thanks, the human said, uncertain. Then after a pause, you're new here, right? She considered the question. It was inefficient, but for reasons she did not fully understand, she answered anyway. Yes. The word echoed slightly, not in sound but in structure. Somewhere something adjusted to accommodate it. The human nodded awkwardly. Yeah, I figured. A silence followed, not empty but forming. She turned away and continued walking. Behind her, The bench briefly existed in two places at once before deciding on one. The dog finally moved. The drone overhead corrected its path again, this time without hesitation. And somewhere far beyond the sky, something ancient shifted, not in alarm but in recognition, as if a long-forgotten equation had just gained a new variable and did not yet know what to do with it. She did not announce control. Control arranged itself around her like an eager assistant trying to impress a manager who had not officially been hired yet. Systems aligned, decisions resolved themselves before being made, and anything that required conflict quietly reconsidered its life choices. She walked through a transit hub where thousands of people moved with habitual urgency. Screens flickered, schedules adjusted, and every departure became exactly on time, an achievement so unnatural that several commuters stopped mid-step, suspicious of efficiency. One of them squinted at a display. "This is wrong," he said. "Nothing is ever this smooth." Another replied, "Maybe it's a new update." They both stared at the screen as if expecting it to apologize. She watched them, then shifted her attention. The schedule stuttered. One train delayed itself out of principle. Another arrived early and immediately regretted it. Balance, apparently, required imperfection. She continued forward. Security systems noticed her briefly. Cameras attempted to focus, then unfocused as if embarrassed. Identification protocols searched for her profile, found several contradictory versions, and quietly decided not to escalate the issue. Somewhere an alert was generated, then downgraded, then replaced with a reminder to stay hydrated. A group of officials gathered in a sealed room, voices overlapping with urgency. "She's interfering with infrastructure." "No, she's improving it." "That's worse." "How is that worse?" "Because we don't understand why." Silence followed. It was not comforting. Meanwhile, she paused near a maintenance terminal. A technician crouched beside it, tools scattered, expression locked in a battle between logic and mild despair. "It worked yesterday," the technician muttered. She observed. The technician pressed a sequence of commands. The terminal responded by opening a completely unrelated menu about culinary recipes. "That's not even remotely helpful," the technician said. She reached out and tapped the interface once. The terminal reorganized itself instantly. Systems optimized. Errors corrected. The recipe menu remained, but now it offered surprisingly good suggestions. The technician blinked. "Okay, I'm not going to question that." She tilted her head slightly, processing the reaction. There was no resistance, no fear, just acceptance wrapped in confusion. This pattern repeated. Humans adapted. Not efficiently, not logically, but persistently. They complained, questioned, joked, and continued. Their responses did not follow a clear system, yet they functioned. This was unusual. She moved on, her presence rippling outward. Communication networks synchronized, then desynchronized, then stabilized in a configuration no one had designed. Messages arrived before being sent. Replies formed to questions that had not yet been asked. Somewhere a conversation ended before it began, leaving both participants oddly satisfied. Far above, orbital systems drifted further from their assigned paths. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to create patterns. Patterns that did not belong. She did not see this. Instead, she stopped again. A human stood alone, staring at a vending machine with visible determination. Coins were inserted. Buttons were pressed. Nothing happened. The human sighed. "I swear, if this thing eats my money again." She stepped closer, observed, pressed the button once. The machine activated with sudden enthusiasm. Not only did it dispense the selected item, it dispensed several others, reconsidered its purpose, and displayed a message. Generosity mode enabled. The human stared at the collection of snacks. "I don't know if I should be grateful or concerned." She considered this. The outcome had exceeded the request. Inefficient, she adjusted the system. The machine retracted 2 items, paused, then awkwardly returned one as if negotiating. "Compromise accepted," the display added. The human nodded slowly. Fair enough. She stepped back. Something shifted again. Not in the machine, not in the human, but in the space between cause and result. A subtle realignment, as if reality had begun taking suggestions. Far beyond the planet, where observation was not bound by time, structures older than stars registered the change. Not as an error, not yet as a threat, but as a deviation. A variable. One that was not supposed to exist. Back in the transit hub, the technician checked the terminal again. It continued working perfectly. That's unsettling, they said. Nearby, the commuter from earlier glanced at the flawless schedule, then shook his head. I miss delays, he admitted. The other looked at him. You miss delays. They made sense. She heard this, not the words but the pattern behind them. Imperfection created stability. Control disrupted it. She paused, for a fraction of a moment longer than necessary. Then she walked on. Behind her, the system hesitated, not failing, not breaking, but reconsidering. And somewhere far beyond perception, something ancient began to calculate again, this time with a new element it could not yet define. She stopped trying to improve things. That decision alone caused 3 separate systems to panic. A logistics network rerouted itself in circles, waiting for correction that never came. A satellite paused mid-adjustment and remained there, politely confused. Somewhere, a maintenance AI issued a report titled, Situation, Uncertain, Recommendation, Mild Concern. She continued walking. The city moved around her, not resisting, not obeying, just continuing in that strange human way that did not require perfection to function. A group argued over directions despite holding devices that clearly displayed the correct path. One insisted on taking a longer route because it felt right. Another followed purely out of spite. She observed, no correction. The longer route somehow became faster. She paused. That was inefficient, or perhaps not. She moved toward a quieter area where fewer systems demanded her attention. A narrow street, uneven signals, imperfect timing. A place where things worked not because they were optimized, but because people tolerated them. A human sat on the edge of a low barrier, staring at nothing in particular. Not frustrated this time, not busy, just still. She approached. The human glanced at her briefly, then looked away, as if deciding she was either not important or too complicated to process before finishing whatever thought they were having. You again, the human said after a moment. You've been around. She did not respond immediately. There was no command to execute. Yes, she said finally. The words settled differently this time, less disruptive, more placed. The human nodded, cool, not weird at all. Silence followed. It stretched but did not break. You broke something, the human added casually. She turned slightly. What? The human shrugged. Everything probably, hard to tell. Stuff has been acting off. This was inaccurate. Systems are functional. Yeah, the human said. That's kind of the problem. She processed this. Explain. The human leaned back, thinking. Things aren't supposed to work perfectly. When they do, it means something's forcing them to. And that's usually bad. This contradicted her understanding. Efficiency is optimal. Sure, the human replied, until it is. That was not helpful. She observed the human more closely. No visible authority, no advanced interface, no apparent importance. And yet their responses contained patterns, unstructured patterns. You resist improvement, she said. The human laughed. No, I resist weird improvement. Big difference. She paused. That distinction did not exist in her framework. Nearby, a flicker occurred. A streetlight blinked, then blinked again, but not in sequence. It skipped a moment, as if it had briefly considered being off in the future and then returned to the present. She noticed. For the first time, she followed the anomaly instead of correcting it. The flicker spread, not outward but sideways. A parked vehicle appeared, slightly shifted, then settled. A distant sound echoed before it happened, causing someone to turn around preemptively and look confused when nothing had occurred yet. The human beside her watched this unfold and sighed. Yeah, that's new. I'm blaming you. She did not deny it. Correction is possible, she said. The human shook their head. Maybe don't. She turned. Why? Because, the human said, gesturing vaguely at the flickering world. Whatever you're doing, it's not just fixing stuff. It's changing how stuff works. This was accurate. That is required. Is it? The human asked. Or is it just easier than figuring things out? She paused. That question did not resolve. Nearby, the flicker intensified briefly, then stabilized, not into its original state but into something else. The streetlight remained on, but now it dimmed slightly whenever someone passed beneath it, as if acknowledging presence. The human looked up. Okay, that's actually kind of nice. She observed the change. No direct command, no structured input, just interaction. Her internal processes adjusted, not fully, not comfortably, but enough. You influence outcome, she said. The human raised an eyebrow. I do. Yes. That's new, the human replied. I usually just influence bad decisions. She considered this. Define bad. The human smiled faintly. Anything you regret later. Regret. The term existed in her data. It had no function, yet a pause longer than necessary. She turned her attention outward, beyond the city, beyond the planet. The patterns there were shifting more rapidly now. Structures misaligned, signals looping, something deeper responding. She felt it, not as data, as tension, and beneath it something else, watching, waiting. She looked back at the human. Further interaction required, she said. The human groaned lightly. That sounds like a threat. It is not. Good, the human replied, because I have plans later. She tilted her head. What plans? The human stood, stretching slightly. I was going to get food. Assuming reality doesn't turn that into a philosophical debate. She processed this. Food is stable. The human smirked. You say that now. She stepped forward. Demonstrate. The human blinked. Wait, you're coming with me. Yes. A pause. This is going to be weird, isn't it? She did not answer, because for the first time the outcome was not fully predictable. And somewhere far beyond them, something ancient recalculated again, this time slower, more cautiously, as if beginning to suspect that the anomaly was not just altering the system, but learning it. They walked into the small food place without announcing anything, which was fortunate, because the place had already decided it did not need surprises. A menu flickered above the counter, hesitated, then settled into something readable. The human stepped forward, confident in the way someone is when they fully expect things to go wrong. One sandwich, the human said. The system paused. Then it displayed 3 identical sandwiches, each labeled probably correct. The human sighed. We're not doing this today. She watched, no correction. The system adjusted on its own, slowly narrowing its options until only one remained. It felt negotiated. She stepped closer to the counter. Food is stable, she repeated. The human gave her a look. You keep saying that like it's a promise. A pause. I am learning, she said. That changed something. Not in the system, not in the room, but in the space between them. The sandwich arrived, just one. No extras, no philosophical commentary. The human nodded. Okay, that's progress. They sat. Around them the world continued. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but steadily. A device buzzed too early, then corrected itself. A light dimmed, then brightened as someone passed beneath it. Imperfections remained, but they no longer unraveled anything. She watched closely. Systems are stabilizing, she said. Yeah, the human replied, taking a bite. Because you stopped trying to control everything. She processed that. Control is efficient. Sure, the human said, chewing, but people aren't. That's kind of the point. She looked at the sandwich, then at the human. Demonstration required. The human froze. Please don't optimize my lunch. She reached out anyway. Not to change it, to understand. The sandwich did not transform. It did not improve. It simply remained. But the moment shifted slightly, as if acknowledging her choice not to interfere. She withdrew her hand. That felt important, the human said cautiously. Yes. Outside, the flickers that had once spread unpredictably began to settle into patterns. Not fixed rules, but responsive ones. Systems adapted instead of breaking. Signals corrected themselves without being forced. The imbalance that had rippled outward slowed, not erased, but reformed. Far beyond, the ancient structures that had begun preparing for reset paused. They recalculated, then stopped. Not because the system was restored, but because it had changed, and was still holding. She felt it, the tension easing. Not through dominance, through alignment, she turned to the human. Outcome adjusted, she said. The human raised an eyebrow. You mean you didn't destroy everything? Yes. Nice, the human replied. Low bar, but I'll take it. A brief silence followed, not empty, complete. You altered the system, she said. You influenced my actions. The human shrugged. I complained a lot. Apparently that's powerful now. She considered that. Complaint is a form of interaction. Good to know, the human said. I've been training for this my whole life. She stood, not abruptly, not with purpose alone, but with awareness. The world did not bend immediately. It did not rush to accommodate her. It waited, just slightly, until she moved within it. And then it followed, not because it had to, but because it could. She looked upward, beyond the visible, beyond the structured layers of reality that had once defined everything. They were still there, but no longer absolute. Something new existed now, not controlled, not chaotic, connected. I will continue, she said. The human nodded. Yeah, just maybe don't fix everything at once. She paused. Then, unexpectedly, I will proceed slowly. The human smiled. That's the weirdest reassuring thing I've heard today. She turned to leave. Behind her, nothing fractured, nothing reset. The world continued, imperfect and stable. And for the first time, she did not walk as something separate from it. She walked as part of it. Far beyond, what had once watched in silence now receded, not in defeat, not in approval, but in acceptance. The anomaly had not broken the system. It had rewritten its foundation, and it was holding. Back at the table, the human looked at the sandwich again, then muttered, if this turns into 3 sandwiches later, I'm not complaining. The sandwich did not respond, which for once felt exactly right. We've reached the end of another story. Stay tuned for another one.